The forbidden question every Arnold Schwarzenegger interview eventually reaches the same uncomfortable moment. Someone asks about steroids. Arnold's response has been carefully calibrated for decades, acknowledging use while minimizing extent, admitting past behavior while claiming different standards existed, defending golden era bodybuilding while distancing himself from modern extremes. But the full truth, the systematic, aggressive, medically supervised use of performance-enhancing drugs that built his championship physique remains largely unspoken. Not because Arnold is uniquely dishonest, but because full transparency would implicate an entire industry, shatter carefully maintained mythologies, and force uncomfortable questions about what his success actually required. This is the story Arnold hasn't fully told. How steroids were unsupplementary to his bodybuilding success, but foundational to it. How the pharmaceutical protocols of 1970s elite bodybuilding created bodies that natural training could never produce, and why the silence around this reality has damaged generations of athletes who believed Arnold's physique was achievable through dedication alone. The truth is complex, morally ambiguous, and reveals as much about society's relationship with performance enhancement as it does about Arnold's championship years. The golden era reality the bodybuilding world Arnold entered in the late 1960s had no drug testing, minimal medical oversight, and widespread use of anabolic steroids among competitive athletes. This wasn't secret or controversial. It was standard practice that everyone understood, but nobody discussed publicly. Steroids had been developed in the 1930s for medical purposes, treating muscle-wasting diseases, hormonal imbalances, recovery from trauma. By the 1950s, athletes discovered these drugs' performance-enhancing properties. By the 1960s, Olympic weightlifters, bodybuilders, and strength athletes were using them systematically. Arnold's generation of bodybuilders, Sergio Oliva, Frank Zane, Franco Columbu, Lou Ferrigno, all used steroids. The differences in their physiques came from genetics, training protocols, diet strategies, and how their individual bodies responded to pharmaceutical enhancement. But the baseline assumption was universal steroid use among elite competitors. The drugs available in Arnold's era were relatively primitive compared to modern pharmaceutical arsenals, primarily testosterone derivatives like dianabol, decadurabolin, and primobolan. Dosages were lower than contemporary bodybuilding standards, but still far exceeded anything a natural body would produce. Arnold's particular protocol, which he's never fully disclosed, likely involved cycling multiple compounds, timing usage around training intensity and competition schedule, working with doctors who understood sports performance, even if they couldn't publicly acknowledge their involvement. The physical transformation. Arnold's physique evolution from ages 18 to 25 demonstrates the dramatic impact of pharmaceutical enhancement combined with elite genetics and training. At 18, competing in junior European bodybuilding, Arnold was impressive, but not supernatural, perhaps 200 pounds at 6'2". Lean and muscular, but within range of exceptional natural development. Within 5 years, he'd added 40 pounds of muscle mass while maintaining low body fat, developed muscle density and fullness that natural training couldn't replicate, recovered from workouts at speeds that allowed twice-daily training sessions year-round. This transformation wasn't primarily through better training or nutrition. Arnold had been training intensely since age 15, was already genetically gifted, had access to good nutrition. The variable that changed was systematic pharmaceutical enhancement. Steroids allowed Arnold to train with volume and intensity that would overtrain natural athletes. They enabled faster protein synthesis, meaning muscle built from training recovered and grew more rapidly. They permitted maintaining extreme leanness while gaining muscle physiological state almost impossible naturally. They facilitated the mental focus and aggression that made Arnold's training sessions legendary. Without steroids, Arnold would still have been an exceptional bodybuilder. His genetics, work ethic, and strategic intelligence weren't drug-dependent. But he wouldn't have been Mr. Olympia. He wouldn't have had the mass, density, conditioning, and recovery capacity required to compete at sport's highest level. The health costs. Arnold has been relatively fortunate regarding long-term health consequences of steroid use, but not entirely free of costs. His heart surgery's valve replacement in 1997, emergency surgery in 2018 were attributed to congenital defect rather than drug use. But medical literature establishes that long-term steroid use increases cardiovascular risks, and Arnold's doctors have privately acknowledged that decades of pharmaceutical enhancement likely contributed to heart issues, even if they weren't primary cause. He's dealt with joint problems, likely exacerbated by carrying unnatural muscle mass on frame not designed for it. The extreme low body fat percentages maintained for competitions affected hormonal balance. The sheer physical stress of training at intensity steroids created orthopedic wear that natural training wouldn't have produced. Compared to many bodybuilders of his era, Arnold's health outcomes have been relatively positive. Many competitors have died young from heart attacks, kidney failure, liver damage directly linked to steroid abuse. Arnold's pharmaceutical use was apparently well managed, medically supervised, cycled appropriately to minimize organ stress. But better than worst outcomes doesn't mean consequence-free. Arnold has paid physical costs for his pharmaceutical enhancement, even if those costs haven't been catastrophic. The moral complexity. Judging Arnold's steroid use requires grappling with complex ethical questions. If everyone at elite level is using performance-enhancing drugs, does individual use constitute cheating or merely competitive parity? If steroids were legal and unstigmatized in Arnold's era, should he be judged by contemporary standards? Does the success Arnold achieved through pharmaceutical enhancement diminish his genuine hard work and strategic brilliance? Arnold's defenders argue he competed fairly within his era's rules. There was no drug testing, no prohibition, no deception about what elite bodybuilding required. He worked harder than opponents who used same drugs, suggesting pharmaceutical enhancement was necessary, but insufficient condition for success. Critics counter that Arnold has benefited from public ignorance about how much his physique relied on drugs, that his success has inspired millions to pursue impossible natural standards, that his partial disclosures have been calculated to maintain mythology while avoiding full accountability. Both perspectives contain truth. Arnold did work extraordinarily hard. Steroids don't build muscle without brutal training, precise nutrition, psychological discipline. But his physique was also a pharmaceutical artifact that natural training couldn't replicate, and he's profited from generations believing otherwise. The silent strategy. Arnold's public handling of steroid questions has been masterclass in strategic ambiguity. He admits use while minimizing details, acknowledges past behavior while claiming different understanding existed then, defends bodybuilding while distancing himself from extreme modern practices. In interviews, Arnold typically says something like, "I used steroids, but they were legal then and everyone used them. The amounts were much less than today. And let me be clear, steroids don't work without incredible training and discipline." People focus too much on drugs and not enough on work ethic. This response is simultaneously honest and evasive. It acknowledges use without detailing extent. It normalizes behavior by claiming universality. It shifts conversation toward work ethic, where Arnold's superiority is undeniable. It avoids quantifying dosages or protocols. It doesn't address whether his public image has depended on people not understanding his pharmaceutical assistance. The strategy protects Arnold's brand, the self-made success story, the proof that dedication conquers limitations, the inspiration for natural athletes. Full transparency would complicate that narrative, force acknowledgement that Arnold's physique required pharmaceutical intervention most people couldn't or wouldn't pursue. The generational damage, perhaps the most troubling aspect of Arnold's incomplete disclosure. Millions of young athletes have pursued physiques similar to Arnold's Mr. Olympia condition without understanding it was pharmaceutical artifact, not natural achievement. Teenage boys have spent years training intensely, eating perfectly, following programs designed by Arnold, growing frustrated when they don't develop similar size and conditioning. Some develop eating disorders, body dysmorphia, depression from failing to achieve impossible natural standards. Worse, some begin using steroids themselves, often without medical supervision, with black market compounds of questionable quality, at ages when their endocrine systems are still developing. They risk permanent hormonal damage, psychological issues, legal consequences, all pursuing physiques they believe Arnold achieved primarily through dedication. Arnold has addressed this occasionally, telling young people not to use steroids, emphasizing health risks, advocating natural training. But these warnings come from someone who built career and fortune on physique that steroids made possible. The disconnect between advice and example is problematic. Would Arnold have achieved Mr. Olympia naturally? No. Would he have become Hollywood's biggest action star with natural physique? Unlikely. Would he have inspired millions worldwide with body he built naturally? Probably not to the same degree. His success depended on pharmaceutical enhancement. But his public image depends on people not fully understanding that dependence. The cognitive dissonance has damaged people who idolized what they thought was achievable naturally. The political complications, Arnold's steroid history, became political liability when he pursued California governorship. Opponents raised questions. Should someone who achieved success through illegal drugs, by contemporary standards, hold state's highest office? Does his pharmaceutical use suggest character flaws, willingness to cheat, prioritize winning over rules, hide truth when convenient? Arnold navigated this by emphasizing that steroid use was legal during his competitive years, that he'd never broken laws, that his bodybuilding career was separate from political qualifications. He positioned it as past athletic choice, not character indication. But the questions revealed uncomfortable truths about American sports culture. We celebrate athletes who achieve superhuman performances, but demand they claim those performances were natural. We want heroes who transcend limitations without acknowledging the pharmaceutical assistance that makes transcendence possible. Arnold's political career survived these questions partly because voters were willing to accept that elite athletics required performance enhancement, partly because his charisma and accomplishments overshadowed pharmaceutical history. The modern context, today's bodybuilding has made Arnold's era look almost quaint by comparison. Modern professional bodybuilders use pharmaceutical cocktails that would have been unthinkable in 1970s higher doses. More compounds, insulin protocols, growth hormone, experimental drugs. The physiques have become grotesque rather than aesthetic, mass emphasized over proportion, conditioning extreme to point of visible illness, athletes dying in their 40s from organ failure directly linked to drug abuse. Arnold has criticized modern bodybuilding's extremes, calling for return to aesthetic ideals of his era, advocating for health over pure size. But his criticism rings somewhat hollow. He's complaining that others took the pharmaceutical approach he pioneered further than he finds acceptable. He's the elder statesman telling younger generation to be more moderate with tools he helped normalize, without fully acknowledging his role in creating culture where pharmaceutical enhancement became mandatory for competitive success. The honest assessment: what would complete honesty about steroids look like from Arnold? Something like this: my Mr. Olympia physique required systematic use of anabolic steroids. Without them, I would have been good natural bodybuilder, but not champion. The drugs allowed training volume and recovery that natural physiology couldn't support. They enabled muscle mass and conditioning impossible without pharmaceutical intervention. I was fortunate to have medical supervision and relatively safe compounds available. Many bodybuilders of my era and afterwards suffered severe health consequences from less careful use. My success has inspired millions, which I'm proud of. But I recognize some people pursued impossible natural standards because they didn't fully understand how much pharmaceutical enhancement contributed to my physique. Steroids were a tool I used to maximize genetic potential. But they were a necessary tool, not optional enhancement. Anyone claiming they could have achieved same results naturally is lying to you or themselves. Arnold has never said anything close to this. Probably never will. The admission would complicate too many narratives, says Bootstrap's success story. His status as fitness inspiration, his positioning as self-made entrepreneur who overcame limitations through discipline alone. The final truth, Arnold Schwarzenegger's relationship with steroids, is neither simple villainy nor complete innocence. He competed in an era where pharmaceutical enhancement was standard practice among elite athletes. He used available tools to maximize potential. He worked extraordinarily hard, even with pharmaceutical assistance. But he's also benefited from public misconception about what his physique required. Profited from inspiration he's provided to people who don't understand the pharmaceutical foundation of his championship. Body and maintain strategic ambiguity that protects his brand while avoiding full accountability. The steroids didn't build Arnold's empire. His intelligence, discipline, charisma, and strategic vision did that. But they built the physique that launched the empire. Without pharmaceutical enhancement, Arnold might have been successful bodybuilder and maybe actor. With it, he became icon. The question society must answer, does that make his success less admirable or simply more realistic about what elite athletic performance actually requires? Arnold hasn't fully answered that question because doing so would force us to confront uncomfortable truths about how we celebrate achievement while demanding it appear effortless and natural. The steroids were real, the hard work was real, the success was real, and the silence about how all three intersected has been most real of all.